Hello and welcome to this podcast. Today I'm going to continue the series that I did previously, which was on customer discovery. And what I wanted to do today was talk about customer discovery and switching gears. And pretty much it's about when you do your customer discovery and you reach that decision point where you realize that what you have is not what the customer wants, and so you have to switch gears. But before I do that, I'm going to kind of recap what we talked about previously in the first video on customer discovery. And as I said, there are three main steps, and I want to add a few more tips to those three steps so that it can help you build a good customer discovery process and get the data that you need to be able to make that decision. So the first step in the customer discovery process is to prepare. And I recommended that you should interview about 75 people because that's a good sample size for you to be able to get a good segment of the population, of the target market, of the people that you are trying to sell your product to, and get the feedback from them. And one thing I want to add to that preparation is that sometimes you may be in an industry where you have to segment your customers and talk to them differently. So what do I mean by that? For instance, when we were working on our medical device customer discovery, this was a device that was going to be used in the operating room. So we had to talk to surgeons, we had to talk to nurses, OR nurses. And then we had to talk to hospital administrators because they are the ones that are actually going to make the decision whether they want to buy the product or not. And then we had to also look for some other influencers that had impact on the decision-making process in the hospital. And so we categorize those four people and interview them separately. And it's important to do that. So if you're in a market or you're trying to target an industry where there are different customer segments, you need to make sure that you isolate them and interview them differently. Because you may have to ask different questions for different segments. And it is important that you do not put them all together because they have different needs and different motivations and different intentions of what they are comfortable with. So, for instance, we had to interview the surgeons because they are the ones that are going to use the products, and the nurses are going to help them use it. But the nurses are actually the ones that do most of the prep work, so their input is very important. And then we have to talk to the administrators because eventually they are the ones that are going to decide whether this fits their budget and how much leeway they have regarding their capital budget or expense budget to be able to afford this product. So it's important to do segmentation if that is what your industry is telling you. So do not lump them all together and treat them as one because you're going to miss a lot of critical information. So the second thing I recommended is to then do the interview. And as I said, you need to just let the interview go where it will go. But before you go and start doing the interviews, make sure you practice, you and your co-founder, you and some friends, practice in some safe zone to make sure that you're comfortable with the set of questions that you're going to ask before you go out there and do it. And then, once you're done with each interview, you need to make sure that you debrief. And one of the tips that I want to give you is that when you do an interview, hopefully there are two of you doing it. One person should do the interview, one person should do the talking, and then the other person is writing. Because that helps a lot in making sure that one person is focused on the customer and asking the right questions, and that is not distracted with writing and missing something. So you have somebody ask the question, somebody do the writing, and then you can switch roles on different interviews, but make sure that that is clear. And then after the interview, you need to then debrief amongst each other, and that is a short debrief about what did we learn today, what stood out today, what was new, what was surprising, and make sure that you write all that down before you move to the next interview. Because, when you do a lot of these things, you end up in a situation where it all gets jumbled together and then you're missing critical information. And one other tip I'll give you during the interview process is that if, for instance, you're doing an interview and, the customer is telling you, okay, I don't want this, I'd rather you solve this problem, I'd rather you have these features, oh, if you have these features, I'll buy it. What you can do to test their pulse is, after the interview, you should just say to them that, okay, I've listened to what you have to say. So if I go and I make the product or I provide the service and it has this feature, this feature, this feature, this feature, would you buy? And that is a good gut check, because if they say no, then you haven't done a good job. Because remember, the process is to be able to flush out, what their needs are, what is their pain point, what are the products they're using now, what do they like about it, what don't they like. If they have an opportunity to design a product themselves, what would that product look like? So if you throw that question back to them with the features that they want and they say no, then there's something missing. Then your product is probably not addressing a big pain point for them, and so that's a valuable data point. So once you're done all your interviews, now you need to review your data, and during this review process, you're looking for trends, you're looking for patterns, you're looking for things that everybody was saying. If they were all saying that they would rather have you do this service or they would rather have you solve this problem, well, the problem you're solving is okay, but they have a bigger problem. If everybody's saying the same thing, that is what the market wants, and that is where you should be going. So your goal in reviewing all your data is to look for patterns, to look for trends, to see what jumps out at you in terms of what are the pain points, what are the features they wanted, what are the services that they would rather have, or don't have and would like you to work on. Or is there another problem that everybody kept talking about, that's the problem that they face the most? And so once you get all that, then the big decision has to be made. This is the point where you have to decide, what did you learn? Did they bite? Did you come out of the interview feeling that, well, we are onto something. Yeah, there were some other features that they wanted and we can easily add that, but our core value proposition is still there. If that's where you are, then you're in a good place. Then you can continue to tweak and then go back to some of these same people and go back and interview them and say, hey, we've listened to you. This is the changes we've made. What do you think? But if you are at a point where they did not bite, you are at the point where they say your baby is ugly, and now you have to decide what to do, that is where you have to switch gears. And this is what we call pivoting. You hear a lot of people say you have to pivot, you have to pivot, you have to pivot. Well, that is just switching gears. And to pivot into a different direction requires some thoughtfulness and decision making. Because, when we were doing our medical device and we went and did all the interviews and then realized that, yeah, the problem we're trying to solve, it's a problem for our customers, but it wasn't the number one problem. There was something that they were telling us over and over again that this was what we want you to focus on. And so we had to make a decision about whether we wanted to pivot into that direction. And that decision was based on us being honest with ourselves and saying, do we as a team have the knowledge, the resources, the time, the money to be able to solve this new problem that the market wants? And if the answer is yes, then you switch gears. If the answer is no, then unfortunately this is the end of this journey. This is the end of this customer discovery process. This is the end of this idea. And you have to come to terms with that and bring it to a close. But remember, the whole idea of doing this was to make sure that you don't go and create something that you don't want. So if you came to the conclusion that this is the end of this journey, that is a good thing. You've saved money, you've saved time, you've saved your resources heading into a direction that would have led to failure or doom. So this is what I wanted to add to the customer development video, because I felt it was important to address this issue of when do you decide to switch gears and how do you do that. And you have to let your data tell the story. And if you decide to switch gears, that's a good thing. If you decide to kill it because that's what the data says, then you should not necessarily dwell too much on that, because it's a good thing. You can then move on to the next project. You can then move on to your next idea. But you would have given yourself a fair shake in going out there, testing the market, and making sure that what you were trying to build was something that people wanted. And that's all customer discovery is about. So thank you. That's the end of this video. I want you to subscribe to our channel for more upcoming videos.